due to the various totem bonuses available on their Ascendancy passive tree.
They're making
Advanced
melee the
players
totem
will also
cucks.
be wondering if the Earthbreaker support allows you to create leap-slamming totems, and the answer is absolutely.
Oh my god, dude. Oh,
As with other
God.
Ancestor totems, the Earthbreaker support also provides a buff to you, granting some increased area of effect with melee skills.
Oh my god.
Rage Vortex provides a new way to consume your rage, unleashing a whirling vortex
That's
that
cool.
rapidly hits enemies within its range. It gains damage and area of effect based on how much rage was sacrificed.
That's cool.
The vortex slows down when enemies survive being hit by it, causing it to deal intense damage to tough targets. While you can only have one Rage Vortex active at a time, characters such as Berserkers who are able to generate a lot of rage quickly will find it a great way to augment their damage output.
I might play this. I might play that. I might play
Bone
that.
Shatter strikes your enemies with a forceful blow. If an enemy is stunned by this attack, a powerful shockwave is released. The area of effect of the shockwave is determined by the duration of the stun you inflict. Each time you use Bone Shatter against an enemy, you take physical damage yourself and gain a trauma stack. The more stacks you have, the more damage Bone Shatter will deal to both you and your enemies. This self-damage mechanic makes the Juggernaut the ideal class for the skill, because they have easy access to lots of armor to mitigate the downside.
I don't like that.
Also,
I
the
don't like the
Juggernaut
type
has
where I take more
ascendancy
damage.
passives that grant increased stun duration, which help make sure the shockwave is as large as possible.
Yo, I'm probably playing that. I'm probably playing
Defiance
that.
Banner
Bone
is
Shatter.
a new purely defensive banner skill.
Ooh.
While you carry the Defiance Banner, it increases the armor and evasion of nearby allies while reducing the critical strike chance of nearby enemies. It
That's
also
okay.
gains stages while carried near enemies and can be placed on the ground to enhance its effects. When the Defiance Banner is placed, it inflicts a taunt on enemies for a
Then again-
duration based on the number of stages the banner had accumulated
Banner's so
while it was
good.
carried. Enemies affected by this taunt also deal less damage to all targets.
Straight Banner reduces accuracy
The
already,
next new
right?
skill is Shield Crush, which swipes your shield towards enemies and sends out forceful waves of damage based on the stats of your shield.
Dang.
These waves can shotgun enemies with up to 2 hits at once. So while Shield Crush is great
Shotgunning?
against groups, it's also effective against single targets and can be used alongside Shield Charge
Oh
and
my
Spectral
God.
Shield Throw. We've improved both of these skills so
Wait.
that the overall aggressive shield build is more powerful.
That's gonna be OP and SF, by the way, chat. Just saying.
The new Behead support gem can only support strike skills and is basically like a mini headhunter. When a supported strike kills a rare enemy, you'll steal one of its modifiers.
What?
Obviously, this gem can't be as crazy as the full headhunter experience, so it comes with some restrictions. Stolen modifiers can persist for 20 seconds, and slaying another rare enemy will replace the modifier
You
you have
can't
active.
extend it. Kind of cringe.
The Behead support gem also grants you more damage against enemies on low life. In conjunction with the Slayer's Bane of Legends Ascendancy passive, this bonus really embraces the execution theme for Behead support. Storm Rain is a new bow skill that fires arrows that stick into the ground. These arrows periodically pulse with lightning damage that arcs to nearby arrows. This skill works very well with multiple projectiles because you can quickly set up a large patch of lightning death. Existing ballista skills in Path of Exile pick their own targets, like sentry guns do. They'll start shooting immediately and will generally target the closest enemies. While this behavior is usually great, sometimes you want fine control over what your ballistas will fire at. The focused ballista support gem causes your ballistas to pick the same targets as you, and they will only fire when you fire your own ranged weapon. It also makes the ballistas fire a lot faster than they otherwise would.
I was gonna say, it
This
sounds really
support gem
bad.
allows you to effectively focus fire on specific enemies such as bosses.
Wait, the whole point of Code is you
Explosive
run around in
Concoction is
circles
quite
and don't
a
do
novel
anything.
Skill. It introduces several new concepts that haven't been explored with skills before. Here you can see the Pathfinder throwing an explosive projectile at monsters. Firstly, you may notice that the Pathfinder isn't holding any weapons. This is because Explosive Concoction is the very first ranged skill that can and must be used unarmed. It's also the first skill that directly interacts with the benefits provided by your flasks.
What?
When you throw your Explosive Concoction onto a targeted area, it deals fire damage and uses available charges from your Ruby, Sapphire, and Topaz flasks to grant bonuses based on what flask charges were used.
What?
The skill still works even if you don't have the appropriate flasks or charges to consume, but correctly managing your flask setup can greatly enhance the power of this
That
skill.
sounds cool.
What we really love about this gem is that it brings to life the idea of throwing your flasks at enemies and having them explode. In conjunction with the flask-focused benefits provided by the Pathfinder's Ascendancy passive skills, we're really excited to see what new playstyles are enabled by this gem. This is the Ambush skill. It teleports you up to an enemy, blinds them, and exerts your next one-handed melee attack. This exerted attack has a high critical strike chance and multiplier. In addition to this helping your assassinations, you can also use ambush to quickly re-engage targets after dashing away.
I'd listen to
Voltaxic
Clunkers,
Burst
to be
grants
honest.
a buff that counts down to 0,
Kinda cool, though.
triggering a burst of lightning damage around you with a portion of that damage converted to chaos damage. Enemies slain by your Voltaxic Burst will also explode, dealing chaos damage around them based on their maximum life. You can stack up many Voltaxic Bursts on yourself at the same time. Consider using duration modifiers to modify the timing of the explosion so that you can cast a skill from safety and then move into a strategic position before it explodes.
He's taking so much damage, chat. Yeah, so you can
When
see.
you use Blade Trap, you throw out a mechanical device with 2 copies of your weapon attached. These blades spin rapidly in a circle a set number of times, dealing damage to anything they pass through. When dual wielding, the trap rotates faster but deals damage based on both weapons.
What? That looks good for
Because
ailments,
it's a
chat.
trap, Blade Trap behaves a little differently to other attack skills by operating independently of your attack speed. This means you'll have some interesting itemization
Imagine a
choices to make,
two-handed
and
weapon
focusing
with that.
more on damage modifiers rather than the typical focus of maximizing attack speed.
Imagine two-handed weapons, slow as fuck.
Summon Reaper creates a single powerful minion that uses fast melee physical attacks which cause bleeding. While the Reaper is active, you can use the skill again to direct the Reaper to a specific location, dealing a powerful attack along its
Fuck, it
path.
looks cool.
The Reaper wants to be your only minion. It reduces the life and damage of your other minions, and will consume them to heal itself and gain damage and speed buffs.
That's cool.
When designing this new skill for the Necromancer, we wanted to explore the idea of having a single ultimate minion.
Yo, that's
While
pog.
there were ways to somewhat achieve this before, the Reaper is quite different in its abilities and interactions with other minions.
Pog
It also
2.0.
feels much more active and directly under your control. One quick note though, the Reaper will absolutely eat your animated guardian if you're not careful.
Sag.
Forbidden Rite is a powerful new spell that fires an exploding chaos projectile at a targeted area. It also targets a selection of enemies in an area around the player's location and fires projectiles at them too. But be careful, Forbidden Rite also inflicts damage on you when cast. If you can find a clever way to mitigate this harmful downside, you'll have devastating and widespread damage. at your
Self-harm
fingertips.
builds 2.0. Wait, what happens? Can you create a custom image taking loop with that spell?
The Eye of Winter is a large projectile that fires out a barrage of cold projectiles in a spiral formation as it travels. When it reaches its maximum distance or collides with the terrain, it explodes, firing out even more projectiles in a spiral.
That looks satisfying.
This type of skill is one we've been wanting to bring to Path of Exile for a long time,
Is that
and we
Frozen Orb?
felt that this new collection of skills was the perfect place to showcase it. This Inquisitor is using the new Battle Mage's Cry skill, which taunts nearby enemies and exerts your subsequent attacks, causing them to trigger a linked spell in your next melee hit. Here you can see the player taunting enemies with Battle Mage's Cry and using Consecrated Path to teleport to enemies. The slam is exerted, triggering Firestorm to rain down on those enemies.
That looks
In order to
tight.
assist with scaling
What?
both attack and spell damage,
Does it trigger
the
6
buff
link?
this walk
if it needs to. So Spectral Helix is now, in my opinion, a lot better. I actually kind of hated the way that Multiproj worked with it and cringed a bit when putting together that footage, but I'm happy now.
It looked cool in the
And,
footage, dude.
The other thing is, we talked about nerfing all the support gems, the damaging ones, right? And we did. That wasn't a lie. But what we forgot to mention was that we've also buffed melee skills quite a lot to compensate for the fact that they were really gutted by the support gem nerfs. So there have been quite a lot of melee skill buffs to counteract a lot of the nerfing there. Now, it's worth noting, we're not trying to buff melee skills in general above where they were before. There may be specific buffs to specific skills, but the support gem nerfing, which was hitting melee skills particularly badly, has resulted in some melee buffs. On the other hand, the spells in general are not buffed above where they were before or anything like that. You know, there may be specific spell buffs, of course.
Spells are OP. Everyone
That
knows
seems fair.
Everyone knows that. Spells are OP.
So a lot of us who have watched all of these Q&As and read your manifestos in the past, we know the answer to the question of trade, like because it's already been discussed to death in the past. But a lot of people who haven't seen those, before we get frustrated with them for asking a question, are asking about trade. So could we just very quickly get a brief summary on trade changes, things like that?
We don't have any trade changes coming in this particular update here. There are two things to note with trade. The first one is, if there are things we can do that improve the trading experience that are small and prevent frustration, we'll probably work on those over time, right? We're not opposed to the idea of making trade less frustrating. We're very careful, though, that currently, trade is both critically important to Path of Exile's success. Like, we're not one of those games that doesn't allow player trade. It's so good that you can find an item and it has value. You can actually trade it with other people and, like, feel like it's a thing that you have and you own. But on the other hand, trade is directly causing players to play the game for less time and have less fun. Like the retention is so much better in solo self-found. You get on average like 10 times as many item upgrades per character slot when you actually have to go and find the item.
It's way better.
And so we know that if we made trade very easy, which we could in a few days make it so you literally type in the item you want, click it, you've got the item, and then there's no real need to play the game beyond a couple of upgrades to your character. And we're already seeing a bit of that with players being able to efficiently max out their character. And so it also, in that case, like combined with RMT, someone sticks some money in, and before we've even found and banned the responsible people, they've got a maxed out character and had their fun for the league. It's not a particularly good situation. And so philosophically, we want to make sure that trade is possible in Path of Exile, but it is not particularly streamlined, because if it's particularly streamlined, people will just max out their characters quickly. And we think it's good that playing the game to get items is an important alternative. Now, the item system, in terms of like the amount of spam of rares and various other bits and pieces in the game, isn't in a perfect state, right? Like we get this work that needs happening there, and so we're focusing on getting that work done so that the game itself is as compelling and rewarding as possible before we even consider any changes to the trade system. It's also worth noting that for those who look at the console or Chinese versions, they have the trade market and say, we really want that. Bear in mind that those players are looking at the system on the Path of Exile trade side and saying, we really want that one instead. So there are pros and cons to both systems, and we do not intend to merge the two together to make an instant trade kind of thing.
Yeah, it seems like our trade system is more powerful overall in terms of actually finding items.
Trading?
Just theirs is like more built into the actual game client.
Theirs has the ability to make offers and have them accepted without having to meet anyone, if you see what I mean. Which has its advantages, but it's basically the difference between easy item finding versus easy item trading, if you see. And so with our system, it's a real pain to, like, it's easy to find exactly the thing you want, but then it's a real pain to negotiate with the person and learn to speak Russian and deal with all of the issues of getting the item.
Well, they're trying to scam you.
Speak Russian. I'd be dope if I learned to speak Russian while playing PoE.
Path of Exile is an educational experience.